In this video, I want to share with you a metaphor that I use in acceptance work around going out and experiencing pain and what can occur if we choose an easier path or a harder path. It's called the River of Discomfort, and the River of Discomfort is about introducing pain. It's about going out and applying some values that someone holds that's important to them, that someone cherishes, and applying it to discomfort. What would it look like if you went out and lived by your values, and what would it look like if you put your values aside because of the pain that comes up and we experience. So I'm going to share with you a model that you can go out and use with your clients. Consider it while you're watching this video about how this applies to yourself, and then we'll go out and explore that a little bit more, and I'll discuss how that looks from the perspective of values. So this is somewhat a values exercise, but it's also trying to bring in acceptance of pain based on values. So the River of Discomfort looks like this. We have obviously the river that starts. So river widens at the mouth over here, and it's quite fast and rapid at the top over here. So over here we would find that the water is rushing with much more force. There's a lot more intensity. There's a lot more pressure that we'd find here. So the current is moving faster. Over down here, we find that the current is much slower. It's much more manageable. It's easier to go out and swim through. So we've got two different paths, if you will, that we can go out and pass on. So what I would do with the client is I would first explore some of their values and look at what are the values that are important to them. What do they identify with? And once we've got some of them, we would start to place that in the River of Discomfort model. So I'm going to write here discomfort. And in actual fact, it's important to use the word discomfort there, because that's what we're trying to promote with clients. We're trying to say there are uncomfortable things that we have to travel across, move across in life. So what we would do is we would use some of those values. And let's say for this example, I'm working with a client, and something that they identify with is the value of connection. So I would put connection up here. Connection's important to them. They want to be close with family. They want to be close with friends and so on. Another thing they might relate to is, let's say, honesty. So being truthful, being honest, being upfront is important to them and somewhat correlates and connects with connection as a value. We might have generosity. Being genuine, being upfront, having integrity, and so on. So not hiding, not putting a mask. It's an important thing that someone can hold. And let's say finally we look at adventure. Now, what occurs in this model is we want to have connection, honesty, generosity, and adventure. And they're important things that we hold, that we believe in, that we want to have. And so when we go to apply that, or when we go to achieve that and have that in our life, we go to cross the river. And what occurs is, if we have the capacity to pass the river at this point here. Now, we've got to remember it's more intense here. It's rushing faster. There's a stronger current here. If we are able to get across, what sort of life does that bring? What does a life of connection, a life of honesty, a life of generosity, a life of adventure give? How would we describe that? And so we would ask our client to describe those things. And usually we get terms such as, well, it would be a rich life. It would be meaningful. So it's rich, it's meaningful, it's got purpose, drive, etc. So it's something that we value a lot. It's something that's quite important to us. Now, what's interesting in this model is that often the things that we want, when we get to just going out and working on them, going through them, behaving in that way, there's a tendency to go out and experience discomfort. And that discomfort can come in the form of anxiety, can come in the form of effort, of energy, of trying to change a habit, and many other different things. So discomfort appears. Now, what's interesting is when discomfort appears, we have a tendency to put things off. We have a tendency to avoid. So rather than crossing here where the current's quite strong and tight, what we do is we travel down to a place where it's a little bit more comfortable. And what happens is we can actually cross here a little bit easier because there's less intensity in the current that's passing. So what's interesting is we're trying to have connection, honesty, generosity, adventure, and we go down the river to go and achieve that. But when we're going out to achieve that, if we're not living with connection, how are we living? And if we ask our clients, they might say things like, well, if I don't have connection, if I'm not living with connection, I'm living by what? And it almost feels like you're disconnected or alone as such. So what happens over here is we write alone. And if you're not living with honesty, if you don't have that honesty, that integrity, we tend to have a distrust or a dishonesty. And once again, if we're not living with generosity, what are we living with? It's a greedy type of life. So we live with greed, and if we don't have adventure, what is life like? It seems to be quite dull in nature. So dull over here. Now, when we look at this, we've got alone, dishonest, greed, and dull. What type of life, if we describe it, what are the terms if we go out and we take that easier path and now we cross over here? So we cross in this direction over here. Now we're living a life of being alone, dishonest, we've got greed, it's dull. Rather than it being rich, meaningful and purposeful, we might start getting terms like it might be poor, disconnected, meaningless, might even be sad, right? Depressing, or whatever other term that comes up. Now, this all comes from the things that we value. This comes from connection, honesty, generosity, and adventure, but we tend to try and avoid the discomfort, the intensity that's up here, and so we go lower on the discomfort, the pain that we need to experience, so we avoid it. We come down here and we pass a whole lot quicker. And in passing a whole lot quicker, it feels easier than to take this route up here straight across, and it leads to something else. What often doesn't happen though for clients is that we don't connect what avoidance leads to. So we don't see that if I put this off, there's a level of dissatisfaction, there's a level of disconnection and meaninglessness that I bring into my life. And so we're saying, hey, the only thing that's consistent in this model is the river of discomfort. So the metaphor around the river of discomfort means that we have to pass the river. It is uncomfortable, it's cold and so on, and it's moving quite fast up here, a little bit slower down here, but it's always going to be uncomfortable. So introduce this with your clients, look at the model, explore what their values are, look at what it would look like if they lived by their values, a richness, a meaning, purpose, drive, something to a life worth living, versus if we put it off, what that looks like, and there's this disconnectedness, there's a lack of purpose, a lack of drive, and and what that feels like. And generally, some of our clients are feeling that way. So it does click and it goes in with their values. So explore that. Consider what it looks like for yourself as well, and start to use the River of Discomfort metaphor with your clients. See you next time.